What is small scale manufacturing and how can it play a role with the next stage of economic growth after this pandemic of ours? Today in conversations ahead of Technically's Introduced conference. Hey, I am Chris Wink. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Technically, the news organization with a community of technology professionals and entrepreneurs. In our Culture Builder Live interview slot, we are talking also about our Introduced conference in person next Thursday, May 12th in Philadelphia. But attendees also get insights and conversations ahead of that conference. Some of them we're doing live like this one, conversations on building better companies and where and how we do that. Today, we're talking small scale manufacturing, which I'm quite intrigued by. I'm joined by Alana Bruce, who's the founder and CEO of Recast City. Alana, thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
I want to dig into what Recast City does because you have this focus here, but let's start with some of the basics. Small scale manufacturing, what do we actually mean by that? Let's start there.
So small scale manufacturing is any kind of business that produces a tangible good that you can replicate or package. My shorthand for it is hot sauce, handbags, or hardware. You can think about advanced manufacturing with 50 employees, but it can still be in the center of the city because of the technology it's using, or an artisan, a single person who might be making jewelry at home and selling it on Etsy full time and working to grow their business.
So then let's talk about how you see this fitting into economic growth. We a while ago chased manufacturing out of our downtown cores. We financialized downtown cores. We moved highly web and professional services types companies in our downtown cores. They were entertainment, they were living, they were clean businesses, I think was a big narrative how our city's changed. You're thinking about bringing manufacturing back. Why and how does that work?
So we're still doing a lot of those things, right? The downtowns that are the most successful are places where people can live, they have housing, places that people can work, but places that are interesting, that don't look like everywhere else. The places that are struggling really haven't figured out what's unique about themselves, what's special about their history, their heritage. And a lot of those places are still sort of grasping at national chains or trying to look like everywhere else. At the same time, retail has changed completely over the last 5-10 years. And so we're seeing a consolidation of national chain stores. We're seeing really a change in the footprint, the square footage that some of these bigger stores need. And we have tons of vacancies going on all over the country, even before the pandemic. And then on top of that, we have this recognition, thankfully, that our economic development, our investment in small businesses and jobs and business growth in the community needs to create a more equitable outcome. We need to be benefiting people who have been historically excluded from those benefits in the past, people who have been underserved by our programs and our investments in the past. And so all of this and a lot more pieces sort of come together to say, is there a different kind of business? Is there a different way that we can support businesses that creates a different outcome? And that's how we landed on small scale manufacturing. Small scale manufacturing is a business that's anywhere from 1 to 20 or 1 to 50 employees. It's modern manufacturing, so it's clean and quiet. And especially when we're looking at consumer facing products, they're phenomenal in storefronts. You can go and look in a storefront and see something being made because we can have production and retail in that same space. Think about a chocolate store that you can walk in and look through the glass window and see chocolates being made right there in front of you, and then go right to the tasting room or right to the retail store and be able to buy those things as well. So that becomes part of the entertainment. It becomes part of the draw, but it also becomes part of economic development so that we're not just retail and restaurants and bars. There's this third piece that's really a missing piece. And it helps us achieve more equitable outcomes because we have this history and heritage of making things in every single part of our population. And so when we go out and we actually search for those businesses and bring them in to the conversation, we can build economic development opportunity, programming, investments, what have you, that specifically benefits those populations and brings them into our storefronts and brings them into our success.
One of the reasons why economic development theory in that last half of the 20th century went from big manufacturing, move a factory over here, to professional services. And then in the last 20 years, there's been obviously a real fixation in and around technology, software, web-based companies. has been the idea of global scale. The web unlocks something, and that we could have this real global scale, and it could create these unicorn effects in which little bits of investment have outsized gains for a community, and it feeds the capitalistic energy around efficiency, and so sometimes small scale we view. I really liked your idea of entertainment, that I don't think we talk a lot about why we still care a lot about small scale commercial corridors, even if it's not the most economically efficient act. And I guess I'm just curious how you hold these two truths things, like economic growth that should be relentlessly pursuing efficiency and creating some winners out of many ideas. How do you talk about also the importance of small scale? Is small scale not just inefficient?
Such an interesting way to think about it. So there's a whole competitive
you
side.
know that economic development theory would push. So there's
yeah.
somewhere that would say, like, yes, I like small scale because it makes a commercial corridor, but at the end of the day, I need to create jobs for thousands of people, and I'm worried I can't do it. I think you push back on that.
But most places aren't going to win that thousands of jobs competition, right? There's only a very few places that's going to win the competition for the 2,000 jobs, let alone the 25,000 jobs, right? And so what are we doing with the thousands and thousands of other places that are never going to win that competition? And they're never going to attract the national store, which I would say you don't want anyway, because those are low wage retail service jobs. Our country needs middle income jobs. We have the greatest income inequity we've ever recorded. And so to solve that, that means that we have to create more middle income jobs that people, and business ownership is one of the great ways to help address the racial wealth gap as well. So when we look at this opportunity, I'm not saying don't go do some recruitment. If you want to do some recruitment, by all means, but that's going to solve this little piece of your economic development strategy. We need a solution that helps the rest of the community. And especially when we're looking at communities where they haven't had an opportunity, they've had not only a lack of investment, but a withdrawal of investment from that community over the last 50, 60 years, then we really need to come up with another way to do it that is really owned by the community, for the community, by the community. And that's one of the reasons I look at this, where if we were spending, what do places spend $5 million, $10 million on their recruitment, sometimes to get 200 jobs. Right. If we wanted to create 200 jobs and we said, let me find 21 person businesses and work with them to scale to each hire 10 people, same number of jobs, businesses that will never leave the community because they have deep roots, right? We're helping businesses scale deep into the community and be a part of the community, and not only hire within the community, which those big recruitment businesses only hire about 30% of their jobs from within the community on average. But they're going to hire in the community. They're going to pay better. They're going to pay good middle income jobs for small scale manufacturing businesses, and they have deep roots. They're not going to leave. They're going to have a really good long-term relationship there. There's a great study done looking at different incubator programs, ones that were about tech unicorns and ones that were about local businesses really looking to scale deep. The tech unicorns, almost every single one of them left. So the community impact, right, in terms of wealth building and investment was so negligible, as opposed to the ones that they were helping scale deep that were local businesses that were not going for unicorn status. So when we're, from my perspective, when we're really looking at community economic development, it's no brainer to go at these local small scale manufacturing businesses that can scale deep. Some of them may end up being unicorns, right? Under Armour was a local little small business when it started. So we have no idea even how to identify sometimes these small scale manufacturing potential unicorns. We don't have the trainings in place like we do for the tech sector, right? We have all of these accelerators and all of these growth programs in the tech sector, but we have very little of that when it comes to small scale manufacturing to even figure out what is the investment strategy, what kind of spaces do they need, what kind of training, who are the mentors for them. We're just starting to answer all of these questions and seeing what happens in communities because of it.
Is there a project that you via Recast City were a part of, or just are watching, that might help folks see what this can look like?
Absolutely. Everything from a smaller city like Columbia, Missouri, where a business improvement district, it's really a community improvement district on an old corridor, 4 lanes of traffic. They decided that they wanted to go after this as one of their purposes. We worked with them. They rebranded the whole corridor. It's called the Loop. It's about making things on the Loop now. One of the things that we did was we worked with them to identify small scale manufacturing businesses in the community, found that there was a huge need for space to do food production. And they went after funding to create a commercial shared kitchen, which they launched in the middle of the pandemic. They're now growing to a bigger space. They also partnered with a local community college to launch a makerspace. They're creating pop-up events. And this is before any new real estate development has happened. They're creating their own small business epicenter for this work within this corridor so that when development does happen, they already have tenants for what's going on there. Similarly, if we look at Euclid, Ohio, they created a great program where they competed assistance for small product businesses to get training on how to go from a home-based businesses to a storefront. And the city is becoming the master tenant on 4 small storefronts to be able to lower the cost of entry for these businesses to move into storefronts in the downtown. And so all of these answers are in response to what each of these cities heard from their small scale manufacturers, which is a big part of what we advocate for, train people about, because we want it, whatever the answer is, it has to be responsive to the community and the business owners there that they're working to benefit.
Is a focus on web and software business distracting?
I just think people thought it was the silver bullet, for lack of a better term. I think that everybody, 10 years ago, everybody said, oh, everybody needs to be the next Silicon Valley. Everybody needs to learn web. And I don't discount it as one of the solutions, but it's not the solution for everybody, and it's not the solution for every place. And so I think we have to say yes, and yes, you can have a web training program. You can help people get into the technology and software sector. But what about everybody else? How about the people who are already making products? They're already selling things at your farmer's market, at your holiday markets. Tons of those businesses want to scale and they have absolutely no support. They could be your storefront users in 3 months. What are you doing for them? And that's part of what we work to answer.
We've experienced that at technically, we're almost 15 years of reporting, and we have gone through an era of digital transformation in which a focus of software and data science and web-based tools probably made logical sense. I think we look back a century from now on this period and say that was what was happening. We were putting every industry in these categories. So as much as we like to tease the increasingly niche enterprise software products, we are just like filling the watering cans of all of these industries, and then you get marginal improvements over time, but that happens. You're making a case that there's a next wave, and there was, an early wave of 3D printing, or several waves of 3D printing. There have been like little sub bumps, I think, at least in my 15 years of reporting, in which we have returned to, well, how does manufacturing come in, and how does that fit into a technology conversation? You and I were joking before we started. I love the old Alan Kay line that technology is everything that's invented after you were born. And so advances to manufacturing for me always felt very naturally at home in conversations around entrepreneurship and innovation. I don't view them as overused. Well, they're overused, but I don't view them as inaccurate terms. They're describing what's the next generation of invention. And I think you're arguing that we need another wave.
Well, and it's a combination of technology and innovation that isn't technology, right? The innovation often is the people. And so when we look at products, there's a whole wave of customization that you want nearby. And so that's not necessarily the innovation of a new tool. That's the innovation of a person using an existing tool in a new way. There are all of these letterpress companies making, cards or candles. You would think that there is every place I go, they say, isn't the market saturated? Well, no, because people keep coming up with funny ways of launching, snarky things to say, new sense, new ways to do it. Right. And that's the market. Just like you'd say, well, with Starbucks, isn't there a saturation in the coffee market, right? It's no different. And so sometimes the innovation is the person and the way they're telling their story and doing their work versus the tool itself. And I think it's important to think about, people want things that are local made. They want things that are custom made. It's not only about efficiencies. It's also about the place and your
Yes.
personal connection to that brand. That's a part of the innovation.
Yeah, I mean, you said it earlier quite well, at least resonate to me, that there is still a conversation around experience. Like the conversation on retail is creating experience. We are watching our national and global chains are thinking about how do we make these more experiential. You would hope or argue that on a smaller scale in commercial corridors, we can say local communities can create their own experiences. And that then becomes some of the product. It's narrative and culture, which is why there can always be another generation of greeting cards, because it's culture built on culture built on culture. So there will be no end of that. It's just a different, fresh angle.
Right. And when we look at main streets in smaller cities or in neighborhoods, right, what's the competitive edge? The competitive edge is being interesting and being different. How do you do that? You do that by tapping into your local business owners, because nobody else has the same story, even if it's even if it's a similar business, right? That's why we're seeing local breweries pop up all over the place. It's something that people want. They want to be a part of it. It's part of a culture, like you said. But when we look at how we create, I believe every community deserves to have a main street or a downtown that is loved. And we don't have that everywhere. And that's part of what creates additional investment in a community, is having that showcase of a place that people want to be. And so how are we thinking about who gets access to the storefront? How are we supporting those businesses? How are we really creating that business development ecosystem that is needed in that community? And how do we go after a business that is in person and online? So it's not dependent on just the incomes in that community. It's quite literally bringing dollars into that place. And that's where small scale manufacturing sits in all of this.
I could talk about this quite a bit longer, but unfortunately we're wrapping up on time. So let's go to what your thoughts would be for other local leaders, whether I'm an entrepreneurial leader, I'm an economic development leader, I'm a policymaker, otherwise thinking about my own city or town, as you rightly point out. What do I do other than, of course, reaching out to Recast City? What else can I do as I try to understand how I should be thinking about deploying these tactics in my own community?
Well, the of course is you should read my book, right? Which is Recast Your City. That's the first place to start. But after that, there's
we'll drop links below, I'm sure.
Excellent. There's three things that every community really needs. And there's a fourth that I sort of wrap around all of them. One is you need the right kind of training. Is there training for small product businesses, both for startups and for scale-ups? Second, is there space for these businesses? Can they get into your storefronts? Is there shared space, even before you get to something like a maker space that's open to the public? And third, is there capital? Are there loans or micro grants that help this kind of business scale? It's usually a fairly unknown business type to the banking community. And so that's a pretty big hurdle for them. So real estate, training, and capital. And then the one that gets wrapped around all of them is PR. What's the outreach to that community? Are there pop-up events? What's the branding around it? Does that community know that there are other people like them in the community? All of these things we've done for the tech sector, where we've wanted to create a strong tech sector, and we're taking the model and adapting it to this other business sector to help it grow.
Alana Purse, thank you so much. Author of Recast Your City, founder and CEO of Recast City. We'll drop links below here. Again, hope you will see you in person at our conference Thursday, May 12th in Philadelphia. If not, though, as this video ends up on elsewhere on the internet, you'll probably be able to click right here and find additional conversations from our Introduce conference. We'll make sure to drop links to Alana's work below. Alana, thanks for the conversation.
Thanks so much for having me.
All right, we'll see you guys, everyone, next time. Bye.